Super excited for episode 39 of House of Experts. What's making this episode even more special is our young guest today. Young by years, but definitely not young by achievements. Sagar Sheth. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to everyone. So Sagar is an alumnus of IIT Bombay, has worked in consulting. So he took sort of the IIT engineer consulting. Then he went to work with a venture capital fund for a brief period. And then the entrepreneurial bug caught him pretty quickly. And he moved to starting his own company. And he's going to share a little bit about his journey, about how he started. But it was an existing tech startup that he joined. I'm not going to spill the beans. I'm going to let Sagar share his own story. And today he runs goDutch, a mobile app with over 200,000 users already and growing strong. Was recently awarded an award by Google in the hidden gem category. So we've got a hidden gem here with us today. And on a personal note, I've had actually the pleasure of working with Sagar while he was an illustrious student at IIT Bombay, running the entrepreneurship cell and being an extremely supportive member of the eCell committee and taking on then as the head of the eCell in the year after. So lots of stories and lots of passion, lots of hard work in Sagar's journey, and we're going to hear it all in his words. So thank you firstly, Sagar, for joining us today.
Pleasure's mine, Vibha. Thanks for having me.
All right. So guys, without much ado, I'm going to jump into our first question right here. Yeah, Shikha, for you, Tinder co-founded goDutch. Yeah. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about that, Shikha. One of the investors from Tinder is also an investor in Sagar's company, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. So Sagar, let's get cracking. First question over to you is, I want to know, since we run an education company, I'm always intrigued by people's early years and their childhood. So what were your early years like? Where did you grow up? What were sort of family influences growing up?
Yeah, so I come from a goDutch family, so business sort of runs in our veins as such.
Hey,
I'm
Marwari, so this is going to be a tussle between the Marwaris.
Yeah, and then you'll hear Sindhis joining in, but no, goDutch are the best. So yeah, I was born in Mumbai. My dad used to run something here, and then he started a new venture in Singapore. So I actually moved to Singapore when I was 2 or 3 years old. And then I was there for the next 7, 8 years of my life. And my dad ran multiple businesses. Eventually, we had to move back to India because he had a new venture coming up in India.
Okay, so
and
your
then
dad is also a serial entrepreneur.
He is also a serial entrepreneur. He's run a grocery kind of a startup, think Big Basket. He's run an HR outsourcing company. Currently, he runs something in financial services. The company recently got acquired by a larger company. So he's done all kinds of businesses, right? IT, tech, something as not digital as grocery. So he's done all kinds of different ventures. And I always used to look up to him, but I was also like very daunted by the prospects of entrepreneurship, right? I mean, there's just so much pressure and so many different things to take care of. I was like, I'll study well. I was always a good student. So I thought I'll study well, get into a good college, do a job, and my life will be sorted. Little did I know that things will.
Your education began at home with your dad, huh? So I don't know if you're giving IIT Bombay credit for the success or to dad. That's going to be a tough decision.
No, dad, of course. I mean, in your early days, family influences you the most, right? Especially your parents and your siblings are the ones you look up to. And it was not just my dad. Actually, all of my uncles run their own, uncles and aunts run their own, successful businesses. Okay. So I was always into that mindset, but I was sort of a little like all of my other cousins also used to run businesses and aspire to run businesses, but I was always more of a job mindset kind of a person. Things
Okay.
have changed since then, but that was my mindset early on.
Okay.
And then
So
yeah, we
very
came
early
back to India.
influences
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, uh, Singapore. Then you returned back to India.
Then I returned back to India. Then I did my schooling here in Juhu in Mumbai. And then after that, 11, 12 is when I did my IT JEE coaching here in
So
Mumbai itself. I didn't go to
what
Kota.
sort of what made you even think of going down the whole IIT route? What was that about?
So honestly, I mean, very, very honestly, there wasn't as much thought put into it as I would have liked there to be. It was like I was very good at maths and science, and I didn't want to do medicine because it involved biology. So I just took up, IIT JEE prep. I don't think that's the way career choices should be made, but that was the way it happened for me. I was good at science, maths, and I thought, let's just do something challenging, right? So that's how I ended up in engineering. So I
Okay.
took up, yeah, metallurgical engineering and material science at IIT Bombay. I was fortunate enough to, get
So
selected for
tell
one of
us a
the
little bit
IITs.
about the whole JE prep and is it as crazy as it's made out to be?
It is. It is. It involves a lot of efforts. It involves a lot of personal sacrifices, not just on your side, but also on your family's side. So, very little TV time, very little computer time. So you basically need to compartmentalize your life into studying and other things. And it's mostly 8, 10 hours of studying in the 11th grade, and then 12th grade, it sort of gets even worse where you're studying like anywhere between 12 to 14 hours of the day. But then I think those 2 years of efforts are sort of, in hindsight, very worth it, because the experience that follows if you get into one of the better colleges is incredible. I think I owe a lot of what I am today and what I will be in the future to IIT Bombay, and I'll talk about that. But I think those 2 years of efforts were definitely worth it.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it's quite a grueling 2 years, but you feel like it was all worth it. Hi, Shikhar,
that's
for you,
correct.
I will take your question. Just hang in there and we'll get to the part about fundraising and investing for sure. I promise you we'll address that. Okay, let's go on. So how was IIT Bombay? Did it live up to your expectations? And share a little bit about IIT Bombay and that experience.
IIT Bombay was, I think, a roller coaster ride. I think engineering by itself exposes you to a lot of different disciplines. Computer science. I took up material science of that, electrical, all of that. I mean, obviously the academic experience aside, which anyway is amazing because you're surrounded by, one of the sharpest professors and one of the sharpest minds in the country in terms of your peers as well. But I think what was amazing about IIT is the fact that there's so much else other than academics going on, right? So I was part of this entrepreneurship cell on campus that you referred to, and I was involved in it from the first year of my undergrad. I obviously did a 4-year program, and I was involved all 4 years of my life into entrepreneurship. So that's when I sort of started realizing that entrepreneurship is also fun, and those were the days when Powai Valley was a big thing. There were startups like housing, Ola had set up in Powai itself. I think there was Topper, which recently got acquired by Byju's. So there were a bunch of startups coming up in the Powai area. So there was a lot of buzz going around of that, and I was really enthusiastic about entrepreneurship. So I was part of this e-cell. So the e-cell on campus basically organizes a bunch of entrepreneurship related competitions, a lot of talks, a lot of
Lots of
seminars.
events, conferences.
Correct, all of that. And I also used to run a magazine for the e-cell. It was called On Space,
Yeah.
and we used to run a blog as well. So I interacted, like firsthand, I interacted with a lot of entrepreneurs, and it was, I think, really, really inspiring to, talk to entrepreneurs and understand their journeys and understand
Okay.
how they, rose through everything. So I think
Uh,
that was pretty formative for me.
Tanga Konya, which branch are you in which year? He said he mentioned he took metallurgy, you said?
Metallurgical engineering and material science. That's right. Yeah,
And he graduated class of 2016. So
16.
been almost 5 years now. Okay, so you obviously took good advantage of the e-cell and other opportunities available on campus. But at IIT itself, you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or you thought it was something you do at some point in your life.
I think I got excited by the thought of entrepreneurship when I was on campus, but I still didn't feel that I was immediately ready to, venture into entrepreneurship, take up lunch directly after my undergrad. I think a few reasons were that A, I think founding team is really important, so I didn't have, co-founders ready in my head. Second, I think I lacked some sort of business understanding because I obviously did a technical degree, right? Engineering is super technical, and although I mean I'd learned some basics of business from my dad and from reading up and all that, I lacked any real world experience. So I
Sure.
thought that maybe, I'll spend a few years actually working and then figure out basically if entrepreneurship is something I want to pursue in the future.
Okay.
So yeah, that's why
So
I took
as
up a
we're,
job after.
okay, as we're about to move on from the IIT phase, anything about IIT you want to share, like sort of one standout experience, one learning, anything that sort of your one big takeaway from IIT?
So I think my one biggest takeaway from IIT is that your network is basically your net worth, right? And at IIT, you are living on campus in the hostel with a lot of different friends. So if the more events you participate in, the more stuff you do, the more people you get exposed to. And now I'm realizing the value of all those relationships I've cultivated over the years. So solid, meaningful friendships and relationships sort of help you a long way in your career in ways you wouldn't even have imagined.
Like
So I think,
something you want to share, like how did a network help you or a connection help you?
oh, so one of the most obvious ones is I actually met my co-founders on campus, right? So both of my co-founders are actually a year junior to me, but also
Oh,
from IIT Bombay. And
okay.
we were actually living in the same wing on campus, so we were living in adjacent rooms, and that's how we know each other. And
Oh,
little did we know that our paths will cross again, and we end up starting a company together. So yeah, I mean
oh
that's
wow.
one real way in which it helped us.
Okay, so clearly, lots of people are saying networking is very important, of course. Okay, IIT happened, then you decided to go to consulting. So, what was that decision driven by, and why did you pick Kearney? Is there a specific reason you went there?
Yeah, so I think a couple of reasons why I wanted to do consulting was one, like I said, I lacked any business grounding, right? No real world business experience. I came from a technical background, and that's something I really wanted to, get my hands dirty in. I think second is consulting provides you exposure across a number of industries, right? And at a stage in your career where you're not sure, whether it's healthcare that you like or it's fintech that you like, you would want to do something more generic. So that's how I ended up in consulting. I think I spent a year and a half in consulting. I did projects across the spectrum, right? I remember my first project was with a very large listed automotive parts manufacturer, and it was a growth strategy project. And we were told to come up with a 5 year strategy, right? What new products or new verticals we should enter into. And within like 2 3 months, I think we deep dived on a number of different areas and then narrowed down to saying that electric vehicles and carbon fiber things are what you should enter in, and the company eventually did that. So I mean, getting that exposure to senior level management, getting that exposure to actually drive what a company will do over the next 5 years, I think those kind of experiences I wouldn't have got had it not been for consulting. So I think consulting was super useful for me in terms of getting my business concepts clear.
Okay, so very early sort of formative exposure to business coming from the Gujarati family of entrepreneurs. IIT giving you that engineering base, giving you those hard skill sets, the entrepreneurship cell inspiring you, exposing you to lots of entrepreneurs, and then consulting giving you sort of foundational skills and very early exposure to uh, how big CEOs etc. think about large scale businesses. Okay, wow. So very sort of strong foundation, Sagar, so far, huh? Okay, then
Yep,
then
yep.
what happened? Why leave consulting? What happened? Like what was your tipping point for that decision?
So I think my tipping point was more driven by the opportunities ahead of me. I was still enjoying consulting quite a bit, but when a few roles in venture capital came across, I realized that, I mean, I'd already realized that entrepreneurship was my calling, but I didn't feel ready for it yet. I thought, working in a VC setup, in a venture capital setup is something which will lead me to that path of entrepreneurship further down the line. So that's why I, transitioned into a venture capital role at Eight Roads, where we basically look at startups from Series A to Series C to invest in, Indian startups to invest in. So I spent a good 2 years there, again, investing across fintech, consumer tech, a little bit of enterprise tech as well.
Ah,
So great
so you got
couple of years.
exposure to fintech with the VC fund with Eight Roads.
I did. I looked at a number of different fintech companies. We are also an investor in Bank Bazaar, which is a fintech company. We are an investor in Covera, which is a mutual fund investing company. So got great exposure there. And I think both consulting and investing are basically professions where in a very short period of time, you pick up like a new topic, do a deep dive, and then make decisions, right? In a VC setup, it's making investment decisions. In a consulting setup, it's basically solving certain problem statements which are given to you. But I think both of those experiences sort of gave me like that ability to, quickly ramp up on new different topics and do stuff. And again, that's been super helpful for me in the startup journey because I mean, one day you're tackling hiring issues, one day you're tackling fundraising, someday you're
Sure.
tackling like product issues, all of that. So, yeah.
Okay. So obviously the exposure did help you. Anything you want to share from the venture capital space? Takeaways, big learnings. What did you learn, and how did you learn to evaluate companies? What are some of the sort of investment theses you guys were adapting?
Yeah, so I think one sort of uh, basic fundamental behind investing is you invest for the long run. So you basically look at the sustainability and the scalability of a company. So you don't just look at what's there right now, but you need to unearth what's in there for the long run, right? So I think so when you're evaluating the founding team, when you're evaluating the economics of the business, when you're evaluating the competitive landscape, all of it has to keep in mind what the long-term potential would look like for all of those factors. So I think that's one biggest takeaway for me from my investing experience, and that goes for my entrepreneurial experience as well. I think I'm in it for
Okay,
the long run. Yeah.
the long haul. Okay. There's this one of my favorite quotes, by this American ice hockey player, which he says like, "Don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where the puck is going to be." So always sort of
Absolutely.
mapping forward. Okay, great takeaway to pick up on, because then as you sort of envision your own startup, obviously you're not looking at something in the short haul, and you've already got your eyes on the big picture. Let's go to goDutch. So what happened then? You spent some 2 years at Eight Roads. How did goDutch happen for you?
Yeah. So I think I'll go back to my IIT days, right? Like I said, Anirudh and Riaz, who are now my co-founders, were also in the same wing with me on campus, and all of us, like all of the wingmates, would go out on trips quite often, and we would order in from outside quite often, and it was always who's paying how much when, right? So if one person paid on behalf of the entire group, then that person would basically be responsible for chasing down the other friends and knocking on hostel room doors and
Classic,
telling कि यार
classic college
मेरा पैसा दे
dilemma.
दे वापस. Yeah. So there's
So many
always that
friendships
one or two
were
people.
broken because of this. Your buddy who ate the biggest slice of the pizza that night.
Yeah, exactly. कि तूने इतना पिज्जा खाया है तो तू इतना पैसा दे. So those kind of things, right? And that's when we realized that the need for such a product to manage group expenses exists, but we didn't really act on it. All three of us took different jobs. So I was working in consulting and in investing. Riaz was working in a fintech product company called Instagram. It's a very well-funded, fast-growing company. So he was working in a more technical role over there, and Anirudh was working in Axis Bank as an operations guy. So all three of us were working in fintech financial services as such,
Sure.
and both of them started up when I was still working in a venture capital role. So both of them started goDutch at first, and then because I was a senior from college, they knew very well. They were always reaching out to me for help around business strategy, around how to make a business plan, how do we pitch to investors, all of those things, right? The more strategic and the more business angle part of it. And then I eventually realized that, this is an idea even I'm super passionate about. And the three of us had very complementary skill sets, product, marketing, and sort of I came many of the business lens. So we thought, why not, jump into it together. And that's how we ended up starting
Okay,
goDutch.
very interesting. So you mentioned complementary skill set. It's actually one of my favorite words to use. If anyone asks me how to pick a co-founder, I always say look for complementary skill set. So, a great takeaway there. What else did you look for? What else do you think makes you vibe?
Yeah, so I think one was definitely complementary skill sets. The second was the word vibe itself, right, which you mentioned. All three of us were obviously friends from now 8, 9 years, but at that point, around 6, 7 years. And we knew each other very well. We had been through a lot of things together, campus placements, college life, all of that. And we sort of knew each other inside out. And that's why we thought that if we are going to start up, then might as well do it with someone you share a great rapport with, because no startup journey would be easy, right? It'll have its own share of ups and downs. So you want to
Sure.
be in it with someone who you really believe in, someone who believes in you as much. So I think that was the other thing that I was looking for, that vibe,
Okay.
should match. Yeah.
Okay. So complementary skill sets, three co-founders, uh, two's company, three's a crowd. Do you ever feel that? Is it too many heads making decisions, or how have you managed to segregate the decision making?
Yeah, so the good thing is we've taken ownership of, different aspects of the company. So, Riaz looks at tech and product, Anirudh looks at marketing, I look after everything else, like in fundraising, legal, finance, operations,
Okay.
engagement, all of that. So we've compartmentalized stuff, but still, I mean, the big decisions, we obviously take them together after consulting each other and after having deep discussions. But at the end of the day, one person is responsible for, his
Follow
primary
that
sort of
domain.
vertical.
Okay, great.
Correct.
Okay. Let's hear a bit about the product. If you could just sort of give us an overview of the product, of the app, how it works.
Yeah, yeah. So goDutch is basically a group expenses app. So basically, if a bunch of friends want to share expenses, then goDutch is what they'll use. It's basically an app to split bills and expenses. Basically, keep track of who owes whom how much, and then pay each other and settle up outstanding balances they may have with each other. So an example would be if, say, four friends have gone out on a trip, and say they've gone to Goa, they have a bunch of expenses, right, from flight tickets where one person has paid for three, four others. Then there are a bunch of meals which they've shared. Someone's eaten, and someone's also had alcohol. So different ways to split expenses and keep track of them, and then eventually settle them with each other at the end of the day. At the end of the trip, if say I owe you $7,000, then I can pay you that. I can close the loop and pay you seven
Does the
thousand
app
bucks.
also integrate the actual payment portion? So
It
people enter
does.
their credit card information in and
It does. So you can basically not just keep track of expenses like you would in a diary, but you can also execute payments to each other. You can also use the goDutch card to actually make payments in real time. So there are a bunch of features around that. Uh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so very, very useful, of course, especially if, from a student perspective, from a youth perspective, young professionals perspective. Um, can we? Okay, we have a question here. Let's take this question. How does goDutch distinguish themselves from their competitors? Okay, of course, because there obviously are many payment apps like this. So what's the USP? What's the differentiation?
Yeah, so what we sort of realized was that there are a lot of these P2P payment apps, right? Like a Paytm, a PhonePe, Google Pay, but there doesn't exist any, group payment app as such, which is basically multiple people paying each other, paying the merchant. So that's where we realized that, there's a gap in the market out there, and something different deserves to exist, especially for group payments, especially given that a large portion of the uh, spends done by people in that age group, 18 to 30, like you said, college students, young working
Sure.
professionals, are group expenses, right? They're staying with flatmates,
Sure.
renting furniture from Perlenco, ordering groceries from Big Basket, ordering meals from Swiggy all the time,
Sure.
right? When people are going on trips, they go on trips with friends, right? So a lot of group expenses again. So
Okay.
that's why we thought that, something deserves to exist. And that's why we started goDutch. And the way we differentiate ourselves from other, similar apps like Splitwise is we don't just keep track of the expenses, but we also allow people to pay each other via UPI. And as you know, UPI has become super big. So we are a more localized product. We have a goDutch card concept as well, where basically if I transact using the goDutch card with you in a group, then money will get deducted both from your as well as my account. So instead of me paying the whole amount on behalf of the both of us, I'll just use the card. Any one person can use the card, and money gets deducted from all the group members.
Ah, I
So you
see.
don't even have to keep track of who paid how much and where and all of that.
I see.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's it.
uh, Falguni Padiyar asking Splitwise does that too. So does the competition also allow for payments through the
No, so
app?
Splitwise doesn't allow payments through its app. They have a Paytm wallet integration, which is only for Paytm wallet payments, but they don't have any UPI integration to, pay each other. They obviously don't have the goDutch card concept as well. That is a first of its kind across
That's
the world. Yeah, yeah.
okay. All right. Thanks, Falguni, for your question. Adya's question, what's your alma mater? Of course, he said he's from IIT Bombay. Adya, we spoke a little bit about his IIT days already on the show. Okay. Um, let's talk a little, about the app itself before we move to other aspects. So, how do you develop an app? For people who don't know, how do you even start thinking about an app? Like, what's the first step one takes?
Yeah, so I think the first step one needs to take is to identify a problem statement and then validate that with users, right? And how do you validate that with users? There are a number of ways of doing that. One is obviously the basic talking to people, taking a survey and all of that. And then the next step after that is basically building out an MVP, right? So building out like a very basic version of the app which does the utility, which is functional, but not a very jazzy version which you're ready to go live with. So build out a basic version of the app and then test it out with users and see what their real world feedback is like, whether they're actually liking it, not liking it, what are they liking, what are they not liking. So that sort of validates the hypothesis you had in mind around the problem statement as well as the solution. So that's how we went about it as well. And it took obviously a bunch of time to do all of it. Riaz, in fact, learned coding from scratch and sort of built out the initial version. Anirudh learned how to design on Figma and, figured out how to do the product design. So, I mean, all of it was done by ourselves in-house, by
Oh
the three
wow,
of us,
just the three of
co-founders
you.
at the very beginning. Yeah, yeah, until
Oh
we
wow.
raised for the rounds of funding.
Okay, so the three of you actually learned how to code from scratch or learned UI UX, and wow.
Correct. Yeah. Everything we figured out ourselves. We wrote the copies, we did the design, we coded it. Riaz did
Wow.
everything front end, back end.
So tell me
So
how did the product evolve? Just to get a sense of like where do you start and where are you right now? Obviously you've not ended because there is no end to a journey like this. But how what sort of modifications have you seen in the product where you're just like, oh my God, what are some of the sort of eureka moments in the product development phase?
So I think product development phase, like you said, is a never-ending journey, right? Every new month you launch new features and you'll realize what customer feedback is like, and then you keep iterating on it, and all of that. And we sort of launched at a time when we were right in the midst of COVID. So we launched our app last July. And at that point, obviously,
Oh,
people weren't, doing group expenses. No one was going out on trips.
yeah.
Flatmates weren't living together. They had gone back to their hometowns. So that was obviously a negative in the sense that, we launched at a time when group expenses weren't big. But the flip side of that was that we got to launch at a time when, because the scale wouldn't be massive, we were able to quickly iterate on the product.
Yeah.
So initially, like in the very early days, we had launched with only the card part of the product. Then we realized that that's a very massive difference from the way people are used to thinking about group expenses right now. So we launched basically the app with a new
With
sort
the
of splitting functionality and settling via UPI functionality. So all of our features have actually come from user feedback because the founders can come up with an initial sort of hypothesis, but the real users have to guide
the
what you're
customer has
actually building.
okay. Customers really shaped your app in many ways.
Correct. Yeah, and they
Let's
continue to do that.
I continue that. Okay, let's take a quick question here from Sandeep, who says, "How close is an expense management app compared to neo banking?" Is this something you want to take?
Yeah, so neobanking is basically providing a digitally native banking experience. So, I mean, the HDFCs and ICICIs of the world are built in with that branch first mindset, right? Where everything requires documentation, conversations, etc. They've obviously tried to build apps and do all of that, but I mean, we've all had poor experiences on them. So basically, neobank is an easier way to do banking. So by banking, I mean saving money, transferring money to each other, reconciling all your accounting statements, all of that. So that's neo-banking. Our product is more for a peer-to-peer kind of a use case where you want to keep track of. So think of it as a ledger to keep track of internal expenses with friends or groups of friends. So it's different in that sense. But
Sure.
I mean, we could have overlapping features right now and over time as well.
Okay, sure. Sandeep, I hope that answered your question. Sabahat's question was, yeah, how do you plan your updates since new features keep coming? Okay, yeah, let's address that in some capacity, right? So, how often do you go through a sort of feature release or product upgrade? Is it something you're just constantly doing, or is there like a timeline saying, look, we're going to actually only release at the end of every 2 weeks or every month, or how does that planning work?
Oh, absolutely. So it's very frequent. So every 2 weeks we launch like a proper update. We release like a proper update with, new features, with bugs fixed, all of that. But also there are times when, you need to release an update because it's really necessary. There's something which is crashed. There is some new feature which you really need to get your users using very quickly. So during those times we sort of break the cycle, but otherwise we have like a 2 weeks, sprint cycle where 2 weeks there's development work happening and then there's testing and then you launch the app every 2 weeks. So that's the cycle we are following right now. Any time period shorter than that means that there's a lot of pressure and you end up making mistakes. Any time longer than that means that you're not frequent enough in your updates
In
for
your
users. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Um, okay, great. So I think that explains enough about the product. I'm going to take this question from Shikhar for you because he's asked the question multiple times in the chat. Shikhar, for you, I hope you're still tuned in. This question's about fundraising. Talk us through the journey. At what point did you guys, let's split this up. So, when did you first think about having to raise money? What was that tipping point?
Yeah, so I think that tipping point came when we had launched our MVP and had realized. So our MVP was like a basic version of the product, like I said, and we had gotten to 2,000 users on the MVP through zero marketing cost. So that's when we realized that, users really want such a product. So now let's build out a full-fledged product. If you want to build out a full-fledged product, you obviously need a proper core team to, work with you. And obviously there are certain other capital expenditures as well. That's when we realized that, we really need
So,
to
so till the MVP
go out
product
fundraising.
phase, it was just the three of you.
Correct. Just the three of us.
Okay, and then that's when you said, okay, now we need a bigger team. Okay, what happens next? So how do you even start pitching, right? Where do you go? How do you even do this? Just for a lot of founders, it's so overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you do this? How do you plan this out?
Yeah, so interestingly, we before pitching to proper venture capital investors or even angel investors, we actually applied to Y Combinator.
Okay,
So Y Combinator is actually like a seed funding accelerator program, the largest of its kind in the world. They are home to companies like Airbnb and DoorDash, which IPO'd a couple of months ago. They funded Stripe, Dropbox, etc. So massive accelerator program. And so we applied to them. They have a standard process where you put in a video submission, you fill in their form, and after that they call you for an interview. So we had to fly down to Bangalore from Mumbai for their in-person interview. And then we got selected in the Y Combinator program, which was an amazing moment for us. And they have a standard deal of, investing $150,000 in exchange for 7% equity. So we basically became a part of the Y Combinator cohort. That was like a 1 crore funding, which was a very niche funding. So based on that, we built out like a better product and sort of started hiring. And at the end of the Y Combinator program, it's like a 3-month program where you fly down to Silicon Valley, you stay with basically fellow founders
other
across the
entrepreneurs.
world,
Yeah.
other entrepreneurs across the world. You interact with other seasoned entrepreneurs. So we had the Airbnb founders, the Reddit founders, etc., come down and talk to
Wow.
us about their experiences. In fact, the Y Combinator partners, the partners in the fund are also all ex-entrepreneurs. That's where we had actually met the founder of Twitch, which is this online gaming streaming company, and he eventually invested in us as well. So yeah, the Y Combinator experience really changed things for us. That was sort of an inflection point in our journey, one of the first ones. And at the end
So
of Y
what did
Combinator,
you guys do? What did you guys do with the money? So what do you do with the first 1 crore? Is it just all deployed largely towards human resources?
so honestly, we didn't really deploy all of it even 3 months after we had sort of raised that amount, but we started deploying it in hiring people and paying for some tech costs, etc. It is more a validation of our hypothesis, basically the investment coming in, also allowed us to at least start hiring people, start drawing out some basic funds for ourselves, because until that time we were also not, drawing any salary from the company, and we were just spending money out of our own pockets. So at that point, that allowed us to, just breathe a little easy and focus on the business as such. So that was what we did with the initial capital before we went on to raise further capital at the end of Y Combinator.
Okay, so Y Combinator happened. You raised the first 1 crore, started getting some people in, and obviously the validation occurs at this point. How else? Because you have a list of marquee investors in your sort of casket. So very curious to understand how did that happen? How was it? Each one just sort of surreptitiously happened.
So I think, again, Y Combinator played a big role in that. So towards the end of Y Combinator, there's something called a demo day, where you basically pitch to a whole bunch of investors, which Y Combinator has curated. And even actually before the demo day, a lot of investors start reaching out to you just because of the Y Combinator brand name. So they follow up with you and try to reach out to you and get to speak with you. And after that, it's about, how much conviction you are able to build in their minds. Founding team obviously matters a lot at that stage, because the company is obviously in its infancy, right? There's not much traction to really rely on. So it's more the founding team and the vision that they have for the business, which the investors look for. And we are fortunate enough to, get introduced to a bunch of investors using them.
Okay, so Y Combinator seems to have really sort of propelled this as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You're sort of attributing it to the founding team, the basic concept, and then your ability to sort of convince and ability to deliver a sound sort of proposal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have investors ranging from like the owners of an NBA team to you mentioned earlier, the co-founder of Tinder. We have Kevin Lin from Twitch, who's the founder of Twitch, investing in us. So we were fortunate enough to convince a bunch of these marquee investors to ride alongside us in their journey. And like you rightly said, I think it's the founding team and the vision that they have, which basically convinces investors to jump in at such an early stage.
Okay, great. Shikhar, for you, if you're still watching, I hope this has answered your range of questions around fundraising. Okay, Sagar, you raised the money, I think about 1.7 million in total so far. Where have you deployed the money, and how much have you deployed?
So $1.7 million is about 13 or crore rupees. So we've, I think, barely deployed, 2-3 crores out of it yet. So we still have a long runway to go. And basically, most of it has been deployed to building out a team. So we now have a core team of about 13 people, everyone coming from different parts of India with different skill sets. And interestingly, we built out our entire team during the lockdown. So everyone's been hired or onboarded remotely from home. Now we've started our office since then. So now there's the office cost and all of that as well. In mid-January, we started our office. So that's obviously team building is one key spend area for us. And second is, I think, marketing. Obviously, it's a B2C product. It's a consumer-facing product. So we do some kind of Google ads, and we have this whole campus ambassador program, etc. So basically, user acquisition is the second big spend area for us.
Since you touched upon customer acquisition, that's actually where I wanted to go. Because if I think about creating an app, and there's so many great ideas out there, what's most daunting about creating an app is not so much the financial investment behind it, because as you said, you can get your bearings right with a minimal investment. But of course, is how do you get users to the platform, right? It's the whole chicken and egg situation. You can build a fabulous app, but how do you get users on your app? Yeah, you have 200,000 users on the app. How do you get the first 20? How do you get the first 200? How does that work? And Sabahat's asking, give us some details on your marketing. So very, very related. Tell us about your customer acquisition strategy.
Sure. So I think customer acquisition is a never-ending problem, right? You need to constantly figure out ways to leverage all your marketing resources to somehow find scale. The way we did it initially was we did it in a very unscalable way. Because we just wanted users somehow. So we basically created these, 50, 60 WhatsApp groups with all our college friends, with all our peers from our working professional lives, all our family members. That's how we got the first 200, 300, or even 1,000 users. But after that, we had to, start finding scalable channels. And that's when we, went out and started like this whole campus ambassador program. Because obviously, like we discussed, college students are a major target segment for this. So campus ambassadors in colleges was a great way for us to market to college students.
So
Eventually,
you were incentivizing the ambassadors?
correct. We have small incentives, and it's not just incentives, but it's more the idea of, working with a fast growing startup that really excites students, and the exposure that they get to marketing and branding, which they really look forward to. So I think that has worked out very well for us. And other than that, there are a lot of these users who are organically searching for like a splitting bill app, or an expense splitting app on the Google Play Store. So we've done some ads around Google Play Store, such that if someone searches for splitting bills, and they come across our app, so that basically high intent users get access to what goDutch is all about, and they get to use our app. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's how we've gone about solving the chicken and egg problem. And then eventually, after a point, our product is basically a group expenses product, right? So basically, you're using it with a group, either your flatmates or your friends
There's
you're
some
hanging out
network.
with. So there's a lot of network effect actually. One user basically gets a bunch of users for us. So
Sure.
that's really working out well for us, and that'll continue to, once we've reached that critical mass, that sort of takes off on its own, similar to any other social media app like a Facebook, or any P2P payment app as well, like a Google Pay. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Okay. So initially it was basically friends and family, just sort of, just getting people who you knew onto the platform.
Yeah. Yeah, initially
Okay.
it was just that, because you want real world feedback from real people. So you get whoever you can get. And then once you've gotten that feedback, once you've realized how users are behaving, you improve the product, and then sort of open up the marketing channels a bit more.
Okay. So in terms of marketing channels, what do you use? What is a mobile app company use? Like, I don't even know what sort of marketing channels would you use to get people on the platform. Is it conventional, like social media platforms that you're using?
Yes, so we're using Google Ads, we're doing Facebook ads. Facebook is obviously both Facebook and Instagram a little bit. And I don't think there's too much different you can do at an early stage in your company. There's affiliate marketing and all of that, which comes in at a later scale. But I think Google and Facebook have access to treasure trove of data and of users, right? So you can't go wrong with both of them. And it's obviously word of mouth is the most important. So if you are acquiring users through Google and Facebook, but they are not spreading word about the product through their own WhatsApp channels or other channels that they have, then it doesn't work, right? So you need to get one
Sure.
user through Google, and then get that one user to generate 5 other users for you. So I think
Okay.
that's the way to go. We obviously have our own organic social media pages as well. So we do a bunch of content related activities on Instagram, on Twitter, etc.
Okay. Great.
We've had some of them go viral as well. So we had created a super cool Mario video which really went viral. We are doing something around Bhul Bhulaiya soon. We've done something around Hera Fairy. So I mean, all of those things you need to leverage as well. So basically, all hands on deck. Do everything you can at the early stage, and then figure out what is working, and double down on that.
And then
I
double
think
down on that.
that's what the strategy has been.
Okay, great, terrific. Thank you for sharing that. I'll take a quick question from the audience, if you don't mind. Um, is the data on the app safe? A lot of cyber attacks. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about cybersecurity. And since you mentioned that payments are actually going through the app, have you gone through, or hopefully not, any sort of cybersecurity attack on the product, and how are you sort of preventing for that?
Yeah, so as a fintech product, I mean, obviously we need to be super proactive, and we can't be reactive to security issues or cyber attack sort of issues. So we've taken all kinds of efforts to ensure that our app is super safe. So we've undergone something called a VAPT audit, which is a vulnerability assessment, penetrative testing sort of audit. All our backend engineers come from companies where they have sort of seen backend systems scale such that no one's easily able to hack into anything or misuse anything. So all of our early engineers all come from startups and not large
Okay.
companies. They come from startups where they've seen companies grow and build out that
In
initial
those.
system
Okay.
and process. So I think that's there. And then we work with very reputed companies. So our payments flow through Razorpay, which is India, one of India's largest payment gateways. We use M2P's Fintech APIs to integrate with the bank, and we work with the bank directly. So I mean, all of that is obviously very kosher.
Okay, great. Okay. And how did the Google Award happen? How did they find this hidden gem here in India?
So honestly, it was serendipity. I mean, we had not applied anywhere. It's basically a process through which they themselves decide which app is doing well and attracting users at a very rapid scale, and people are giving great feedback. So we have a great rating on the Google Play Store, and attractions really picked up since the
Okay.
last few months. So Google themselves discovered us, and one fine day someone congratulated us, and we were like, "Why are you congratulating us?" And then he told us that it's because you won this award. He sent us a
Oh,
screenshot, and that's when we realized. Yeah, I mean, it's a great feeling to be awarded by Google Play Store. Basically, has all of the apps of the world on their platform. So, and there are hopefully many more awards to come.
many, many more awards coming your way for sure, Sagar. As I'm winding down, I want to, just touch on some few macro questions. So, for someone who wants to sort of build an app, um, do you think it's the technical skills matter more, or is it the business acumen that you bring? And so you feel like, can you hire out the tech, or you feel you can hire out the business side? What should, if you're going to be one founder, what should you have?
If it's a single founder, then I would encourage a tech or someone with some basic tech and product chops. So it doesn't need to be the person doesn't need to be the best coder in the world, but he or she needs to be someone who understands the way tech works, understands how front end works, back end works, product works, UI UX works, all of that, and is able to sort of link everything together. So I think if it's one founder, then I would encourage that founder to have some own product and tech chops. But I would encourage people to not be a single founder because it's a hard journey, right? You want people who are at the same level with you to, sort of ride through the storm with you. Because there'll obviously be many ups and downs. And you want someone who's at the same level, who you can share ideas with, brainstorm with, bounce ideas off with, and who's in it for the long run. So I think 2 or 3 people is ideal. There have been people who've scaled companies which have scaled with only one founder, but mostly those are repeat entrepreneurs, people who know how things are done, people who have
Okay.
the tenacity to sustain. Yeah,
Okay. So your advice would be to always have multiple co-founders and sort of share the load as you're building out something.
absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. And what's the vision looking like? Obviously there are two ways, right? Like most companies we see broadly, either you sort of ride it through and wait till the company goes public, or you do an early exit, get bought out by uh, a competitor or someone who wants to sort of build or add on to their boutique range of services. So where are you? Is there a vision? Is there a plan, or are you just sort of leaving it up to fate?
Sure. So basically, there are two visions, right? There's one vision for the product, and then there's one for the business. So in terms of the product, I think the way we've been thinking about it is for the next year or two, we want basically our app to become the de facto app, which anyone uses when they're thinking about group expenses. In the long run, we'll obviously, I think, move ahead from group expenses and also sort of act as an entry point to group commerce. So that's the product vision, right? I think in terms of business vision, we've not like when we started out our company and through the last year or two, we've never thought about selling the company or doing anything of that sort. For us, it's all about scale, scale, scale. And once we've scaled, we'll figure out what the next best thing to do with the business is. But right now, we are only focused on growing the company and not even thinking about exiting at any stage, whether it be selling to a competitor or selling to some other investor or anything
Okay,
of
so
that sort.
you're completely in sort of
So
that
hopefully
that.
IPO, but we'll figure out over time. Yeah,
Sure. Okay. So you're in a growth mindset right now. That's where you're
correct,
at.
correct.
Okay. Terrific. All right, Sagar. Thank you so much, and thank you for all those learnings. You've been extremely generous, sharing very sort of factual, on the ground experiences, and I'm glad we were able to get you on the show because getting an early stage startup is obviously very different from hearing some of the other entrepreneurs we've had who built out companies that are now 5-10 years mature. You've been able to give us sort of very the nuts and bolts of building a tech platform. Personally, I've ended up learning a lot from you. So thank you so much. And I mean, I'm sure the sky's the limit for you, Sagar. You've got everything going for you: stellar education, great family support, great co-founders, and of course, a terrific vision and a clarity of thought that you've expressed so well on the show. So my best wishes to you, Sagar, and wishing you all the very best always.
Thanks for the kind words, Vibha. I hope this has been useful to all your listeners and watchers. And yeah, we'll continue to stay in touch.
Great. Thank you, Sagar. Stay in touch, man. Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you.
All right, guys, that brings us to the end of episode 39 of House of Experts with Sagar Sheth. Learning about early stage mobile app development, obviously a very hot space. And Sagar was very generous in showing us just literally how to get off the ground. So, for anyone who's looking at building a product, I think he sort of demystified the process for us and almost made it, in my head, just doable. I'm not so intimidated by having to build a product now because he literally walked us through every step in the journey. And of course, he made it seem a little bit easier than it really is because he's obviously got great backing of founders and his own vision and perspective. But for anyone out there who is looking for some inspiration, I think Sagar was able to offer us that. Have a great evening, guys. Going to sign off now and welcome you back next week with episode 40. And as I always say, if you're looking for for inspiration, a specific career or industry, message me or reach Ivy, and we'll try our best to bring an expert from that domain. Until then, have a great evening and see you guys soon. Take care.